welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask anything that you like about politics, and nobody's going to judge you or roast you. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts, independents, people that don't pay any attention to politics. Everybody is welcome here. You can ask any kind of question that you like, whether it's a simple question or a complicated question. It can even be, how can I start learning about politics if you're somebody that doesn't know anything about it? Everybody is welcome here. Just throw your questions in the chat and we will get to answering them. Dimitri asks, are you for the Provo IRA or the official IRA? I don't know enough about the IRA to pick which flavor of IRA I support. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah. Sorry, Dimitri. Sorry, but my main expertise is in American politics. If you had a question about American politics, you can throw that in the chat. All right, welcome everybody to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jarrett. I'm here to answer all your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated, be they left wing or right wing. Everybody is welcome here. What is up, Mia? Great to see you again. So, it doesn't matter if you're left wing or right wing. No one's going to judge you for your political beliefs or affiliations or whatever. So long as you're asking questions in good faith, you are welcome here. So go ahead and throw your questions in the chat and we will get to answering them. This is not a debate show. This is not a show where Republicans and Democrats yell at each other and call each other names. What is up, Will? Good to see you again. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions, so go ahead and throw them in the chats. I know there's a lot of really popular shows out there with debate bros and people trying to win, people trying to own the other person. Well, that is not what this show is. So we are strictly a no fighting, no bullying, no harassing, no yelling zone. SD5 says, what if you don't have a wing? Then that's totally fine also, SD5. Do you consider yourself wingless? Do you consider yourself to not be left wing or right wing? Do you think of yourself as an independent, as a centrist, or what? Let me know. All right, Lucas says, what do you think about illegal immigrants in England and who do you think should be our leader? So who should your leader be? Not Reform and not the Tories. Like, they are completely full of shit, so do not vote for, do not endorse. Nigel Farage is terrible. But yeah, I guess I would go for either the Greens or Labour. That's number one. Number two is immigrants are a net positive everywhere they go, so I don't think that you need to, be overly concerned about immigrants coming to your country because, if you give it time and resources, they end up being the benefit of everybody. Alex says, Trump or Kamala? What a weird question for 2026. Seth says, you're left or right wing? I am left wing. What's up, Willie? Great to see you again. Lauji says, if voters choose between candidates funded by the same rich donors, is this still democracy? Yes, because those candidates have different platforms. Those candidates have different political coalitions. Those candidates have different histories of accomplishments. And so, if there's one rich guy who gives to both parties, but one party more legislates for the wealthy and one party more legislates for the working class, then you should vote more for the working class party. You can kind of connect the dots between a funder of a campaign and some shitty behavior that a politician does, but it's not a one-to-one. Like, sometimes people just take money because campaigns are expensive. Sometimes people take money from organizations because they don't want to get attacked by those organizations. Smiley Face says, are you a socialist? No, but I'm also not a capitalist or a communist. I believe in a mixed model. Fadlit Chikar says, what's your opinion on Netanyahu? War criminal, terrible person, far-right psychopath. Nobody should vote for him. He belongs in jail. Seth says, what do you think of the fact that the Dutch are in 2050 in minority if this immigration keeps going? I don't think that the people in... where the fuck are the Dutch from? Denmark? No, those are the Danes, aren't they? Who are the Dutch? Is it Neanderthals? Not Neanderthals. Not Neanderthals. The Netherlands is what I meant to say. Sorry, guys. I'm tired. Holland! Sorry. The Hollandaises. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. When you bring other people into your country gets better. Yes. All right. Nicholas says, "What do you think about Romanian political parties? Don't know anything about them. What is up, Jersey Rican? Good to see you again." Somebody with no screen name says, "I need to ask, bro." All right, go ahead and ask. Jake says, "You don't even know who the Dutch are, and you're giving political advice." I'm not giving advice. I am answering questions about politics, and I never claimed to be an expert in European politics. My primary expertise is in American politics. Reboot says, "What's your opinion on Native people in Western Europe becoming minorities in their own countries?" It's fine. It's completely fine. There's no downside to it. Daniel D says, "What's with the Michelle Obama is a man comment?" One of the UFC fighters. That's like something that he likes to say because he thinks it's funny. And I don't really think that it's that big of a deal. This is a dude who gets hit in the face for a living. So I say, let him say whatever shocking, dumb thing he wants to say. Will says, "What's your opinion on Brexit?" Brexit was one of many dominoes that fell because hostile foreign nations like Russia and right-wing billionaires wanted to break up international coalitions so that the wealthy could have an easier time of instituting a new aristocracy. And they've been marginally successful, thanks in no small part to people working against them and developing class consciousness, but also because right-wing autocrats tend to be pretty incompetent. And, we've seen this time and time again. So it is something that we should be worried about and that we should continue to strive against. And if I was in the UK, I would try to re-enter the EU at my earliest convenience. But yeah, this is not an organic thing that happened. This was because people that wanted to break apart alliances of free nations put a lot of time, money, and energy towards it. All right, Magasaurus says, "Why did Biden remove DNA testing for minors at the border?" I don't know if that's a real thing, Magasaurus. It sounds a little fake to me. Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate you. Will says, "In gentry and royalty." Don't know what that means. I didn't see your question. Person with no screen name. Magasaurus, I already answered that one. Dason says, "Why did my anime girl body pillow break? Humping it too much? Question mark. I don't know. All right, somebody with no screen name or picture says, "Thoughts on 9 p.m. curfew for 17-year-olds in Britain?" I mean, I understand if there's like riots happening, maybe it's best in order to bring about more stability, and then people can start going outside again. But I am not an expert in UK politics. Magasaurus says, "LMA, you didn't answer. You dodged it by saying you're ignorant." That's not what I said, Magasaurus. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Devil says, "Who will be Israel's next target after Iran and Lebanon?" Oh, I've got no idea. I think Netanyahu's probably got his hands full with Palestine, Lebanon, and Iran. Let's see here. Captain Raven Dirty Turd says, "If dogs can legally hold land, how come they can't vote?" I don't know if dogs can legally hold land. I suppose. Yeah, no, I don't think they can. Dilyar and Mia, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. All right. Charbel says, "I am Lebanese and I like Israel. Is that bad?" I don't think it's bad, but I definitely think it's a little weird to have an affinity for the country that is bombing you. Jason says, "Thoughts on taking down hentai piracy sites?" Hold on a second. This dude says, "Bro is ignoring us now." Well, I haven't seen your question, man. Charbel says, "I want peace." So do I, my guy. So do I. All right. Let's see here. James says, "Do you think the IRA are terrorists or freedom fighters?" So here's my my litmus test for if somebody is a terrorist or a freedom fighter. Are you doing collective punishment on citizens, or are your strikes targeted against like the military or the military of other nations or the rich and powerful? If you are doing violence, and particularly if you're doing violence against citizens who are not involved in oppression, then that is called collective punishment, and that means that you're a terrorist organization. But I don't know enough about the IRA to get into it. Druid says, "Is the Second Amendment worth all the gun deaths?" I don't think so. There are plenty of other countries without a Second Amendment that are doing better than America is in many regards. Elijah says, "Best Tunisian political figure ever. Don't know enough about Tunisia to comment." Olive says, "What are the geopolitical implications of EU enlargement for the U.S.?" It's a difficult question to answer, Olive, because right now America's relationship with the EU is in question, whereas before we had this very stable and consistent relationship with the EU where we were all working together and we had kind of like a unified goal of a peaceful world order, and we were trading partners and partners in democracy. And now that is an open question where we have the fucking Vice President of America, J.D. Vance, going over to Europe and saying that Europe is like the biggest threat to America, which is like blatantly untrue. It's like psychotic. So yeah, I don't know. I think that it should. I think the EU should expand, because when you have powerful countries like America being controlled by psychopaths, corrupt psychopaths like Donald Trump, then you need to band together in order to withstand political pressure from them, you know? Yeah, hostile foreign nations like to divide and conquer. So do not let yourself be divided, and you will not be conquered. All right, Abdurin says, what do you think about Somali government and Shabab? I don't know anything about the Somali government. It's the Rocketeer says, oh, did you get the bleeping on warning? I haven't figured out how to turn that off. So if anybody can figure out how to turn that off, I do not believe that there's any value in these beepies that are happening. Save says, can I ask you questions? Yes, you can. Jersey Rican says, do you think the orange felon a Kremlin puppet? I don't know if Donald Trump is a Russian agent, but if he was a Russian agent, he would be doing basically the same shit that he's doing right now. All right, Wolf Joe, I'm going to give you an opportunity to stop being anti-Semitic at your earliest convenience. Save says, I am Somali. Can I ask you questions? Of course. Goat Demon, same thing to you. Sethiv says, can you answer me, please? Sethiv says, if you think immigrants are good for a country, how do you explain the statistics in raping/criminal? I can answer that easily, which is that immigrants do way less crimes than natural citizens per capita. So if you really wanted to eliminate all crimes, or at least like to get fewer crimes in your country, literally the best thing you could do would be to get rid of all the citizens and replace them with immigrants. All right, J Mag says, if Zelensky and Putin were in the octagon without a referee, who'd win? Probably Zelensky. Wolf Joe says, Jewish man defends immigrants. Congratulations, you're blocked. I warned you. Okay, DZ says, Viva Trump cabrones. What a weird thing to say. Najib says, is China better than the U.S.? I don't think that any country is better than any other country. Stephanie says, what do you think about Taiwan and China? Generally speaking, I tend to come down on the side of smaller nations that are being threatened by larger nations. Now, I know that this is for some reason a really tricky political situation, so not every elected politician can say as simply as that Taiwan deserves autonomy and protection from China, but I am not a politician, so I'm able to say that. I don't know if somebody could tell me why any human being would not just full-throatedly say that unless they were worried about sort of like global political geopolitical consequences, like trading and shit like that, or, you know, pissing off China enough for them to support the North Koreans or Russia more, then I would love to hear it. O'Brien says, is Catherine Connolly starting in an all-time President G? I don't know what that means. Just Cause says, a higher percentage of immigrants means lower percentage of crime. That is accurate. Septic Salad says, how do you feel about massive economic success of Ireland after lowering corporate taxes to 12.5%? I am skeptic of that, Septic. I am extremely skeptical of that. What you generally see by lowering the corporate tax rate, what you're talking about is basically trickle-down economics. Like, if a company is massively profitable, lowering the amount of taxes that they pay is trickle-down economics. So if we're talking about small businesses, like, yeah, let's support small businesses by cutting their taxes. But if you're talking about massively profitable corporations like Facebook moving over to Ireland so they can pay a lower tax rate, you might see like an initial uptick in things like employment and investment, but it always goes in the shitter. Like, it happened in America, and it will happen in Ireland too if it hasn't happened already. Okay, Sammy says, will you condemn Israel? I will not condemn Israel, but I will condemn Netanyahu and his government. But yeah, there are a lot of really good people in Israel. Okay, Septic says, yes, massive economic boom, not initial for 20 years. Yeah, I'm skeptical of that, Septic. Okay, Sammy says, oh, hell nah. Are you denying that there are innocent civilians in Israel, Sammy? Are you not happy with me just condemning Netanyahu and the people who are currently in charge of Israel, Sammy? Charbel says, how should we disarm Hezbollah? Oh, that's a really good question. I've got no idea. It's complicated, I would say. I think that maybe going after their funders is probably the move, but even then, we're talking about some three-dimensional chess where you can't just invade Iran. We're seeing how that's not working. Sanctions also didn't work, but potentially we could have had some, some progress on that if we had kept with Obama's nuclear deal, but Trump threw that in the garbage for some stupid fucking reason. Save says, except me, we talk for some minutes. I don't know what that means. Ricardo says, if same as pageant to turn to ball, what happened to baby? Don't know what that is. Will says, we must away with the House of Lords. They are unelected lawmakers. I don't know anything about the UK government. All I know is never vote Reform, never vote Tory. What is up, Peter Mendelssohn? Good to see you again. Septic Salad said, how do you feel about the obesity epidemic in the U.S., and are you happy that Trump is tackling it? Trump is not tackling the obesity epidemic. If you mean that that people are becoming less fat because Trump is making food more expensive and making more people starve, then I suppose you could make that argument. But no, I don't think that, obesity is not even close to like the number one issue in America right now. So I would be much happier attacking, poverty than obesity. Solar says the right and left are designed to divide so U.S. can be conquered easily. That is inaccurate, Solar. There are different things happen depending on who is in charge, Democrats or Republicans. Marley Poet says, will you condemn any Israeli wanting continuation of war and occupation? Oh, yes, 100%. Anybody who wants war, I condemn. Anybody who does violence, I condemn. If you're an Israeli settler kicking people out of their houses in the West Bank, then you fucking suck. I will condemn you until the cows come home. Philosophical Peacock says, looking at Trump, do you really think he cares about obesity? I mean, you no lies detected, Philosophical. Marwan Lady Katie 978 says, what do you think about the Israelis releasing Epstein files when Trump refused to hit Iran? I don't know if that happened, Marwayne. But yeah, I don't really care if Israel decides they want to throw Trump under the bus by having Mossad release Epstein documents. But I don't think that happened. Okay, Sethov says, you're happy with the growing Islam all over Europe? I mean, you're allowed to be whatever religion you want to be. So why would I be upset about that? If there were more Christians or more Jews or more Buddhists or more what are the dudes with the shaved heads? Hare Krishnas, it's all, that's what freedom of religion is about. You're allowed to be whatever you want. Darius Stone says the corporate tax cuts in Ireland absolutely catapulted their economy in the 90s and allowed them to get up to EU standards on infrastructure, reduce unemployment 50%ish to 3%. It was a huge success. Yes, Darius Stone, I buy that, but I do not believe that is going to maintain. Because what happens when you empower monopolies is they just keep on taking and taking and taking. And so, I hope that what happened to America does not happen to Ireland, but potentially you guys have more employee protections than we have here, or monopoly protections. But yeah, I just do not buy that is a long-term goal. And if it hasn't happened in Ireland already, it's because they're too busy looting America at the moment. Jersey Rican says, can we go back to the separation of church and state? I would fucking love that. Sir Jesus says, what is your opinion on Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera? I don't know who that is. And Falange, is that Nigel Falange? I don't think that's the same person. Will says, how are the midterms going? They're going pretty good so far. We've had a bunch of primary elections, and the progressive Democrats seem to be doing really well in those primary elections, so very pleased about that. Excuse me, but the main elections don't really start happening until October, November. 3237 says, thoughts on Canadian PM Mark Carney? I think he's good. Tempo Mod says, will the U.S. and shit rail, wow, ever not be the most hated in the world? Yeah, potentially. If people vote for better leaders. America can do better than Trump, and Israel can do better than Netanyahu. Alrighty. Jersey Rican says, I like Carney. Cool. All right, scrolling up. Odin's son says, how important is assimilation? Ooh, that is a really good question, Odin's son. So, I think that there is an organic assimilation that happens with immigrants. I don't think we really need to sort of like beat them over the head with it. Where, America has been America for a really long time, and we've had all different kinds of immigrants coming in at, various times. And, sometimes they get discriminated against, and so they start a Little Italy or a Chinatown. But then those people's children eventually leave and grow and sort of like mingle with America. And as they become more American, then America becomes a little bit different. It becomes a little bit what they are as well. And that's the cool thing about living in a melting pot is, you get really dope ass food from every fucking country, and also you get brand new foods that have never fucking existed before as American culture mixes and does fusion with those cuisines and shit. Seth says, "What's your political dream in your country?" I mean, I would love it if there were no elected Republican politicians in my country. I think my dream would be that the most right-wing politician that we have in the government would be Chuck Schumer. All right, Internet Judge says, "Do you believe high rates of immigration and socialism are in opposition?" No. Kia Girl says, "Thoughts on restricting children access to social media sites?" I'm for it. Diffron says, "Pru 16 non-TP." I don't know what that means. Irish Page says, "The buzz happens when you say fuck." Oh, that's fine then, But I do want to turn that off because I don't really give a shit if people hear me curse. All right, Marwayne says, "Do you like the New York mayor?" Yes, I do like Mamdani. Mamdani fucking is killing it. We elect a fucking Muslim Democratic Socialist to the mayor, and the Knicks win the fucking championship for the first time in over 50 years. Doesn't seem like a coincidence to me. Don Carlos says, "Do you believe in the divine right of kings?" No, I do not. Someone with no screen name says, "Do you know anything about the political compass?" I think I do. Sedev says, "So you find it okay that the culture of your country fades away because of the mass immigration?" I mean, I don't really have a problem with that. I think cultures always change and flow and develop. I think that if you're holding on with both hands to tradition or old culture, like, you're going to eventually be disappointed whether there's immigration or not. So yeah, I think that you need to start looking at things like culture as just sort of like being in the ocean, because waves, they come and go, and people change and people grow. And if it's something that's really cool and amazing and is beneficial for society, then those things tend to stick around, even if the original people behind them tend to go away. I would say that I am just as upset about whatever white culture exists in America going away as I am about interesting foreign cultures going away, because the populations decline or languages that disappear because there's no more people from those nations that exist anymore, shit like that. Okay, Phil says, "That dude wants horse and buggies back." No, I don't. Somebody with no screen name says, "What do you think about left libertarianism?" I mean, it depends on how you define it, but if we're talking about like libertarian, like the government shouldn't exist, then I am not for it. Phil says, "Immigration is great for the country." That is accurate. Matt says, "Vote one nation." I don't know what that means. Short says, "Should Elon Musk be sent to Mars?" I think he would love that, and I would love that as well. Will says, "What do you think about the e-gales of Snowden?" E.g. Welshire. I have no idea what that is. Alrighty, let's see here. Mikhail Meme, good to see you again. We are doing great today. Matt says Australia. All right, I don't know anything about Australian politics. Collect with Kim says, "You think SpaceX stock will tank?" That is a really good question, Collect with Kim, because right now there are a lot of companies doing really well in the stock market that are not doing well financially. And so you have to wonder, when is the house of cards going to fall? Will it ever fall? It should have fallen already. It's weird that it hasn't. Is it possible that the people in control of our financial institutions have kind of like reinforced this house of cards in a way that they will continually make money and sort of like, create value out of nothing, and then keep their businesses alive on the promise of a value that will never happen? Or will there eventually be some sort of a market crash and a correction for all these companies that are making zero profit, less than zero profit? Well, these companies are like billions and billions of dollars in debt, and yet they are worth billions and millions of dollars somehow. So yeah, I don't know. The stock market it's kind of fake, so we just kind of have to wait and see, I suppose. I'm betting that there's going to be a correction, but I could be wrong. I have no idea. Avrian says, you look like Harry Mack. Thank you. I think that's a compliment, right? Internet Judge says, if you continue to have high immigration, how are you paying for socialism? Infinity money glitch, question mark? No. When people come into the country, those people do work, and then they make money, and then they pay taxes on that work. So the more people that you have working and paying into taxes, the more money that a government has available for quote-unquote socialism, Internet Judge. BitNevo says JD Vance was on The View today and claimed Epstein hated Trump. Why is he all in on this? For better or worse, JD Vance has tied himself to the Trump train, meaning that as that ship goes down, sorry for mixing my metaphors, as that ship sinks, he doesn't want to get sunk with it. So he's doing everything he can to fucking bail water out of that sinking ship. But I am not going to let America forget that he was complicit in all of the bullshit of Trump raiding the Treasury Department and putting it in his fucking pockets and his kids' fucking pockets, you know? What is up, Ecuadorian? Mikhail Meme says, thoughts on Trump being against Netanyahu bombing buildings in Lebanon and said that not every one of those buildings are Hezbollah. I think that Trump has recognized how politically damaging this war is, and ergo, he is trying to stop it. He thinks it'll be good for him to stop it, and so he's trying to stop it, and Netanyahu continuing to poke Hezbollah and Lebanon with bombs is not helping that. And so, you know, he's still so far away from a deal with Iran. Like, all they have now is reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before this stupid fucking war started. So yeah, I think he's just desperately trying to do diplomacy, but he's never been good at it, so he's bad at it, and he's continuing to be bad at it. Ashton Connor says, "Do you hate Keir Starmer?" I don't hate him, but it really does seem like he is letting down his party. Eric Zapata says, "You keep getting bleeped out new function." Yeah, I guess they don't like people cursing on here. I got to figure out how to turn that off because I don't give a shit about if people think I'm cursing. Hussein asks, Reform UK is a bad political party. Do not vote for them. Do not support. Plant Daddy Mix says, when will we eat the rich? If you're talking about, like, metaphorically, like taxing them so that they are no longer so wildly wealthy that they can have like a dozen mega mansions and mega yachts and mega private jets, then I say let's do that fucking right now. But if you're talking about literally, I don't really believe in both cannibalism or violence. Kat Kotabelli says, your opinion on Egyptian President El-Sisi? Don't know enough about him, so sorry, Kat. Internet Judge says, can you provide me countries with high immigration with strong socialism? I can't, Internet Judge, but you know, if you're being dogmatic about socialism, about like what socialism is, then I can't, because there are no socialist nations. If you want an example of a nation that has had high immigration in the past and a lot of socialist policies, I would say America. That is part of the reason why the New Deal was such a successful implementation, was that we had a lot of people who were suddenly making money who were then able to spend that money. All right, Christopher M. Lewis says, people involved said there's a deal, but at least I know you told me there's not. So it's not that there's not a deal. It's that the deal that they have doesn't involve any of the things that still need to be hashed out, like Trump's, like Iran's nuclear program, like ownership of the Strait of Hormuz, like Iran's relationship with Israel, and the way they treat their own citizens, their relationship with Hezbollah. Like there's a lot of things that still have not been worked out. But it is true that there's a ceasefire, and it is true that the Strait of Hormuz is now open, and that we are no longer blockading the Strait. I have to ask, if there's anybody here who is in the gay community, are you guys having fun with how often they say on the news reopening the Strait? Like, that sounds like something that the gay community could have a lot of fun with, Like, if there's somebody in your clique that's like really good with hooking up with guys who are quote unquote straight, like this guy's reopening the Strait or something like that. Like, I don't know. I'm not part of the community, so I can't really speak, but it just sounds like it sounds like it's got a lot of potential, So if you are part of the gay community, like, take that and run with it. That sounds fun to me, Alrighty. Shork says, do you think Iran is in control of the peace deal? I mean, they have all the leverage, so I would be surprised if they ended this with anything shy of an incredibly better deal than they had with Obama. AX says, anything about politics? Anything that you like? Aaron says, opinion on Freemasonry. I have no opinion on Freemasonry. Mara Wayne says, it feels like blackmail by his own government. Mara Wayne says, do you find it weird that Trump really tried to stop the war and then started it when his files showed? I mean, I don't think that's exactly what happened, Mayor Wayne. But I mean, if you're asking me, did Trump start this war badly, incompetently, and for corrupt reasons, then the answer is yes, obviously. I just don't think it's I don't think it is the way that you describe it necessarily. All right, Mikhail Meme says, but don't you agree with him when it comes to Netanyahu has done in Lebanon? Oh, yeah, definitely. Now, let's be clear about this. Like, the deal that Trump is working on, he's going to be giving away the farm. Like, there's no way that America gets out of this situation better than before this war started. But like, take the deal. Like, this war is dumb. It is bad. It is expensive in both resources and energy and life, in human life. And so end the war. End it now. But I am not going to take as a factor of ending the war that I have to pretend like Trump did a good job with either the war or this negotiation. Okay, ham and cheese sandwiches. Politics equals illness. No, that is inaccurate. A says, are you a civic nationalist? I don't know what you mean by that. IX says, who is the Minister of Interior of Albania? I have no idea. Samuel CN says, what do you think about accelerationism? I guess it depends how you define it. I think that some people say accelerationism when they mean like hastening the downfall of America so that a new socialist utopia can spring from the ashes. I don't think that is a good political philosophy. When you hasten the demise of a government, then you are asking the most marginalized and weakest parts of the population to suffer exponentially during that transition. And we also don't know what's going to pop up from the ashes. Like, it could just as easily be an authoritarian government as a socialist utopia. All right, D says, reopening the straits, LOL, hadn't considered that spin, LOL. I mean, I have heard nothing else every time I hear that on the news, you know? Okay. Ecuador says, if Americans don't want immigrants like me here, why don't we mass support the Americans out of Latin America first? It would give us our jobs back. Yeah, for lots of reasons, people decide to leave America. Do people who are anti-immigration think that people should not be allowed to leave America? Okay, Etsetch says, by that logic, independence war was bad because it affected marginalized people. I don't agree that is accurate at all. Etsetch. So yeah, I don't even know how you're making that conclusion. Rares Games says, do you support Trump? No, I do not. He is an incompetent, corrupt narcissist. Etsetch says, are you a materialist or an idealist? I would say I'm probably like a combination. You know, I think it depends on the situation. Seb says, thoughts on the UFC freedom fight? It was pretty stupid, you know, a big waste of time, energy, and resources. No matter who you are in America, whether you're left wing or right wing or whatever, you should be pissed that Donald Trump was more focused on throwing himself a birthday party by having a UFC fight on the lawn and spending your taxpayer dollars to do that fucking shit and be able to sort of like advertise all of his fucking companies. I saw an ad for fucking Trump coin. I saw an ad for some other fucking stupid Trump merch. I saw an ad for some other Trump company. I forget, World Liberty or Truth Social. I saw an ad for that on there. You should be pissed. You should be fucking pissed that the president of the United States is way more concerned with enriching and celebrating himself than trying to bring down costs for you and trying to solve any of your problems. Try to give you better access to healthcare. Trying to cure any diseases that you or your children or your family members might have. Make education more affordable. Make housing more affordable and available. Not doing any of that. Just throwing himself a stupid fucking UFC party on the lawn, forcing everybody to watch it, and just advertising all of his fucking grifts, all of his fucking companies the entire fucking time. Like, I don't understand how people are not pissed off about that. Somebody whose name I can't read says, do your best TIE fighter impression. I don't have a good TIE fighter impression. Okay. Mikhail Meme says, thoughts on Sweden deporting people who are under 18 years old who goes to school? I mean, I don't think that you should deport people who are just trying to get an education in your country. I think you should only deport people if they are doing like really bad crimes. Some dude says, I know this is the least important thing about it, but having to have a paywall through this is kind. I need to hear the rest of that comment. Some dude, let me know what the rest of that comment is. To everybody else, welcome. This is Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jared, and I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics. Having a paywall through this is kind of bad. Yeah, is this supposed to be a celebration of America's birthday? If it is, then you should let Americans watch it. But I mean, in reality, that's not really what it was. It was just, a Trump spending American tax dollars to celebrate himself and enrich himself and enrich all of his buddies. So I guess it just kind of makes sense, like I would much rather whatever ding dongs are paying to watch that get what they pay for, basically. Jimmy says, is flangism best? No. Gunrunner says, nobody gets angry about politics because the last 20 years has just been horrible. Nobody gets angry about politics because the last 20 years have been just horrible. I don't really know what you mean by that, Gunrunner, because you're saying that the last 20 years have been horrible, which I'm not necessarily arguing against. Although, I mean, if we're talking about 20 years ago, we're talking about 2007. That's when Barack Obama got elected, and I do not agree that the Obama administration was horrible. Michael Anthony says, which do you think we get first, the actual deal, terms with Iran, or the full Jeffrey Epstein files? Probably the Epstein files, because you really don't need good diplomacy between a bunch of different geopolitical motivations to get the Epstein files. All you need is a couple more Republicans to turn, Riptide says, yeah, but Democrats do the same. No, that is inaccurate, Riptide. Inaccurate. False, false, false. I'm happy to get into more detail than that if you like, but the both sides narrative is completely inaccurate. It is propaganda perpetuated by the billionaire class to try to get people not to vote. And so you can miss me with that nonsense. Okay, Kat says, do you think that religion should be outside of politics? Yes, separation of church and state. Michaela Meme says, Sweden is being led by a party very similar to the Tories in the UK and is blended in a bit with Reform UK thoughts. If I was living in Sweden, I would be working my ass to switch that government up. Gunrunner says, we are desensitized to it. The last decent president was Clinton. Oh, I don't agree with that. I think that Biden was a decent president. I think Obama was a decent president. Carmine says, remember when they painted over the tennis courts in the White House? I do not remember that, Carmine. Julio Galeni says, thoughts on social liberalism? I guess I would ask you to define it. Gosh says, what do you think of people saying the far left is as harmful as the far right? I think that is an inaccurate thing for people to say. Gosh, I agree with you in disagreeing with that. Jimmy says, do you think communism should be allowed publicly as a normal thing? Yeah, why not? We already have communism here in America. Every employee-owned company is essentially communist. So yeah, I think that if people can utilize the freedom of speech to say that they're fascists, that I think that people should be able to utilize freedom of speech by saying they're communists. Fotis says, are you left or right? I am left. Gunrunner says, Biden was a decent vice president, not a good president in my opinion. I think it's an open question as to what he did when he was president, Gunrunner. But if you're judging by the actions of his administration, I do not think that you can argue that it was not a wildly successful presidency. Now, there are a couple of things that you can point to that we know were sort of like Biden putting his finger on the scale that were bad. For example, his relationship with Netanyahu, his decision to run for a second term, etc. But other than that, like the things that we can't give him credit for were great, or the people that he appointed to the government were incredible, like Lina Khan at the FTC. Whoever was the head of the NLRB at the time did a fucking amazing job. Yeah, I don't think that you can argue that he wasn't a good president in that regard. Okay, Average Joe, great to see you again. Says, what would your message be to elected Democrats that are criticizing Trump's Iran deal instead of criticizing starting it and being happy we stopped? I mean, I think it's a delicate balance of basically being like, we need to end this war at all costs right now, but that does not mean that we have to pretend like Trump did a really good job with this. I think that it's illustrative of how high of a bar we are constantly putting the Democratic Party on, that we are asking them to do that every single time they open their mouths. You know, it seems easy, but if you keep getting asked the same questions over and over again, like sometimes it gets exhausting to be like, let me clarify, hashtag end the war right now, but let's not pretend that this was a good deal or that this war accomplished anything or whatever. But yeah, you know, I do think that that is the correct opinion, is to say, stop the war now, take the deal, and also he did a really bad job. We are worse off now than we were before. The government of Iran is better than they were before. But yeah, take the deal, end the war. Okay, ET says, do you know anything about UK politics? The only thing I know about UK politics is never vote Reform, never vote Tories. Carmine says, does Average Joe have a one-sided beef with the Democrats? I don't know. They might know about him, you know? They love stomping on progressives like Average Joe, so it's possible that he's on their hit list. John Scarf says, thoughts on Biden's gay pride on White House lawn? I do not remember there being a gay pride event on the White House lawn during the Biden administration, but I also don't have a problem with it if it happens. Yeah, you know, because Biden he wasn't advertising Hunter Biden's company at the same time, which is what the Trump administration did during the UFC fight. Kat says, would you like to see more socialist politicians getting popularity like Mamdani in NYC? Yes, 100%. Let's make that happen. Let's make that happen, Kat. I'm not waiting for that to happen. I'm actively trying to make that happen. In fact, my guy fucking Sykot in San Francisco just lost his fucking primary. So I guess I didn't do enough work for him, you know? Or none of y'all fucking listen to me. Everybody was hyping up Mamdani, and I was like, dude, there's a fucking awesome dude named Sykot in San Francisco right now. He's another Mamdani. Let's all fucking support him. And he lost his primary. So, like, fuck me, I guess. You know what I mean? Okay. Luca says, is Trump any good? No. CS says, why did it beep when you said Mamdani? Because this beeping function is not great. So I got to figure out how to turn that feature off. Julio says, would you support a united Europe? Yes. Brando says, thoughts on the manosphere? The manosphere seems to me a logical extension of the kind of grievance politics that the right uses in order to win elections and steal money from people. I think that it was a very savvy move by the right and the billionaire class in kind of like funding this little astroturfed movement. But it is essentially valueless. It is basically creating an atmosphere where you are telling men that the reason why they are miserable is because of women and minorities, and that the only solution is for them to become a billionaire who can fucking kickbox. You know, it's like you are forcing the exact kind of toxic masculinity onto these people that cause them to be tortured, and saying, no, the reason you're being tortured is because of women. You know, there was an excellent documentary on the manosphere by that British dude. I forget what his name was, but yeah, it's a house of lies. It is. I do not believe it is doing anything positive. Okay, Daniel says Gaddafi was the best politician ever. You know, I saw people saying that. That's the troll. So I'm just gonna go ahead and block you now. Gosh, are there any right-wing opinions you agree with? No. Carmine says, we need a list of what beeps and what doesn't. Or we can just someone can just figure out how to get rid of it for me. A.E. Smith says, when you said Mamdani, it beeps. I guess maybe they don't like it when I talk about progressive politicians. Okay. Let's see here. Kat says, do you think that mainstream media makes socialism seem anti-American? Yes, 100%. Even good mainstream media, like stuff that we generally view of as being relatively independent, it is still owned by rich people. And so they are going to be skewing narratives in order to placate their billionaire owners. Mikhail Meme says, do you think Ukraine is winning the war? It kind of seems like that lately. You know, it seems like Putin's trying to come to the table. And potentially the damage that this war has done to the people in Russia and the economy is maybe starting to bite them in the ass. But, you know, sometimes it seems like that, and then sometimes it seems the other way. So who the fuck knows, you know? Alrighty. I apologize if every time I curse, it beeps, guys. But I do not believe that I will ever stop cursing. So I just got to figure out how to turn off that. I just got to figure out how to turn off that feature. Patrick says, is there a meaningful way to express home invasion, or is it always cruel? I don't know what that means, Patrick. Okay. Julio says social liberalism is like social democracy with a bit less control of the economy by the state, keeping state-funded welfare. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a problem with that, Julio. I don't really have an issue with um, a different scale of democratic socialism than what like my ideal would be. Like, I think that that's a fine place to compromise, whether we're talking about a 15.1% tax or a 13.7% tax. Like I think we can make there can be some wiggle room there. But the general dynamic of a mixed economic model with elected representatives that we, the people, vote for, and that the vote of the people shall not be infringed. Like that's essentially what I think are the non-negotiables. Unfortunately, that is not the current platform of the Republican Party, who is in control of America. Gunrunner says the Dems would move towards the center a little and stop supporting super far left reps, would not win. Hold on a sec. Gunrunner, I don't understand what you're saying at all. It's like you're saying two completely separate things. If Democrats would move towards the center a little and stop supporting super far left reps, would not win. Would Republicans would not. Oh, okay. If Democrats would move towards the center a little and stop supporting super far left, Republicans would not win. So I don't agree with that at all, Gunrunner. There are some polls that say that America generally views the Democratic Party as too far to the left, but the devil's in the details, and you really need to look at this issue specific. Because if you ask the majority of Americans if you want the Democrats to be further to the left or further to the right on specific issues, you discover that it is not as cut and dry as that. For example, Americans want the Democratic Party to be further to the left on economic issues and on healthcare, but they want them to be further on the right on things like immigration and law enforcement. And so it's not as simple as saying that the Democrats should not embrace, that the Democrats should stop embracing super far left politicians, because first of all, the Democratic Party typically doesn't. You know, we got people like Average Joe who are pissed as hell that they're not supporting them more. You know, so it's not like the Democratic Party is so fucking progressive that, you know, we're shoving these Mamdanis down your throat. When if you ask anybody who likes Mamdani how the Democratic Party treated him, they'll tell you that they treated him like shit. You know, Triska, Mandy, Kelly, and Mia, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. So yeah, Gunner, I think you really need to adjust the way that you view that issue, because I think that you are believing things that are inaccurate. And I'm happy to go into more detail on that. If you have further questions, let me know. Scrolling down to the bottom, SLT Violated. Great to see you again. The best political system for both people and society is a healthy mix of left-leaning social libertism and economic socialism. Yeah, potentially. I don't really have an issue with that specifically. Kat says, do you think most people that voted for Trump voted for him because of racism? Ooh, that is a really good question, Kat. I don't know. I don't know what most would entail. I don't know what the percentages are. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. You know, there are some statisticians who will tell you that that is the case. I think somebody pointed out that if you look at the districts that voted for Trump the most, the thing that polled the best in those districts was whether or not white people thought it was okay to say the N-word. And so, you know, an argument could be made, but I don't know if I buy that necessarily. I think the people are a little bit more complicated than that. But I could be wrong. You know, what's up, Jonathan Swift? Says, how do you think the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will end? I got no fucking idea. I think that who's in charge of America and who's in charge of Israel will have a lot to do with that. And who is in charge of those countries is always changing. Maybe not changing enough for some people's taste, or quickly enough for some people's taste. Willie says, Chipotle or Qdoba? I was always a more Chipotle fan, but seems like they are really devaluing their customers right now. What's up, Platinum Soul? Good to see you again. Carmine says, tickets for your show go live when? They're live currently, Carmine. Kat says, do you think crime is driven by poverty and media picks it up and blame it on racial groups? Yes, 100%, Kat. I believe that is a wildly accurate thing that you have just said. Ryan says, do you think America is hosting the World Cup to try to prove that they're not the bad people. No, the decision for America to host the World Cup was made a long time ago. And America is not the only country hosting the World Cup right now. It is a shared hosting with Canada and Mexico. So yeah, and I honestly I don't believe that the current government of America really gives a shit if anybody views us as the bad guy. It kind of feels like they are trying to show everybody that we're the bad guys. So, there you go. All right, Mercenary says, why would the U.S. send billions to Israel? So that is a complicated question, Mercenary. The short version is that the current version of America's government is in control of the Republican Party and Donald Trump. And this is a group of people, Trump, his administration, his political party, they're extremely corruptible, and they have a lot of very bad faith motivations. For example, there are people in the elected officials in the Republican Party who believe that we need to send billions to Israel so that they can take over the Middle East and bring about the rapture. That is a real thing that elected Republican politicians really believe. They're trying to bring about the apocalypse by empowering the nation of Israel. But there are a lot of different motivations. Some of them are, we want access to the Middle East, and Israel is a very valuable place to put our military bases, and so we're basically bribing them to let us do that. Ryan says, it is the only shared World Cup in history, I might add. Oh, yeah, interesting. Okay. Mikhail Meme says, do you think obesity is a big problem worldwide nowadays? I don't think so. I've always heard that it is just a problem in certain Western countries like America, Canada, and the UK. But I could be wrong about that. It's definitely not front of mind for me. I think that there are way bigger issues to be concerned about. Okay, Platinum Soul says, I thought FIFA makes the decisions, not America, but countries have to bid, and USA, Mexico, and Canada made their bid together, and that bid was made in 2017. Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not up on all the comings and goings of FIFA. I only know that they are a wildly corrupt organization. CS says, did you have Marjorie Taylor Greene turning on Trump in your 2026 bingo card? Yeah, I think it's so fucking weird that Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying correct things and John Fetterman is saying wrong things. Like, did they switch bodies or something? Did they both pee in the same fountain or touch a skull or some shit? All right. I am Legion. Good to see you again. Says, wait, so Republicans are tongue. I don't saw her accelerationists. Come on, I am Legion. Like, you used to ask substantive real questions. Come on, man. Be a good regular. I am Legion. Mike Green says, when the rapture comes, do you think they'll still maintain their Republican positions? I think that they believe that they are on the side of God and Christ. I think that the ones that believe in empowering Israel to bring about the apocalypse, they believe that they're going to heaven if that happens. I am Legion says, I'm sorry, I watched Gunther Fellinger play The Fire Rises. I don't know what any of those things are. Mark says, objectively, what are the downsides to both the right wing and left wing? So it's going to be a little difficult for me to answer this question, Mark, because I am a left-wing person, and America's government for the past 50 years has been aggressively right-wing, even under Democratic administrations, because we have or had a more checks and balances, shared power kind of relationship with the White House and Congress and the Supreme Court. And it was really difficult to sort of like switch that ship into a left-wing direction, even under Democratic presidents. We have basically been living under like Reaganomics ever since the 50s. So I'm looking around at all these fucking problems of climate change and pollution and economic inequality and rising poverty and homelessness and desperation, deaths of despair, crimes of despair. And I'm just like, this is all caused by right-wing billionaires. Like, this is all that is all of their fault, and I don't know, like, I would love to see a world where we go too far to the left and we start seeing problems that I can be like, oh yeah, sure, I guess that's one of the problems that happens when you move to the left. But I don't know. I don't see it. I mean, hypothetically, you could say that one of the issues with the left being a little bit more regulation happy is that sometimes they overdo it and allow those regulations to get co-opted by people who are bad actors, but I don't really think that that's a problem with left-wing philosophy. I just think that it's a problem with doing left-wingism correctly as opposed to doing it sloppily and poorly. Consti says the economy of the USA is in no way aggressively right wing. Yes, it is. Our corporate and rich person taxes have been slashed by the Republican Party for every administration, every Republican administration since Reagan. So yeah, 100%. That is a right wing economic philosophy. LJ says, "Hello, are you lefty or righty? I walk straight." Anyway, and you? I am a lefty, LJ. Are you saying that you're a centrist? Are you saying that you're a little bit of both, LJ? Let me know. Mark MT says, "Well, right wing done correctly should be good too by that logic, right?" I don't think that there's a good version of this, Mark, because there's one ethos that has connected the Reagan administration to the Bush administration to the Trump administration, and that is cutting taxes for the billionaires and cutting regulations for their corporations and cutting taxes for their wildly successful corporations, allowing monopolization to happen, to run rampant. Is there a good version? I don't think there's a good version of that. I don't think there's a good version of giving the rich even more money and cutting the regulations that make it so that they can't pollute our air and our water and give all of our kids cancer and shit like that. I don't think that is an accurate philosophy. I think if it was going to work, it would have worked. We've been doing it for 50 years. It's not working. Alrighty. Mark says, "Wouldn't a center world be a bit better since it's a combination of both?" No, I don't agree with that. All right, CS says, "Would you call Trump's deal with Iran Timu JCP away?" That's very funny. All right, Platinum Soul says, "Do you think it's fair to right wing to focus on America? I think America went beyond left and right. There's left, right, and corporate now." No, I think for better or worse, right now we have two main political ideologies. We have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And we can see over the past 50 years what the left-wing parties have accomplished and what the right-wing parties have accomplished. And if we're judging based on that, I will put my chips behind the Democratic Party every fucking day of the week. Fierce Phoenix says both parties are corporate. That is inaccurate, Fierce Phoenix. The Democratic Party has done more to push back against corporate America and the wealthy elites than the Republicans, and the Republicans have done more to S the D's of corporate America and their wildly successful businesses and extremely wealthy human beings than the Democratic Party has ever done. So I can go into more specifics if you want, Fierce Phoenix, but what you just said was wildly inaccurate. LJ says, "Doesn't help anyone unless they actually do something." I don't know what that means. LJ says, "Hard-labored people pay the most tax. What about celebs?" I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. LJ says, "Where does all the tax money go?" Well, it goes to the military. It goes to social safety net programs. But right now, it mostly goes to building data centers and detention centers and ICE. And it goes to immigration enforcement. Alrighty, we are almost at an hour, everybody. So get your final questions in. We're going to start wrapping things up pretty soon. Mikhail Meme says, "Do you think that I could become an American citizen when I turn 18? Well, you're from a predominantly white country, so with Trump in charge, you're in a much better position to become an American citizen than anybody else. Smokey says, "Repeal 17th. Thoughts and why or why not?" Well, let's look this up real quick. 17th Amendment. Direct election of U.S. senators by the people replacing your system, state legislatures. No, I think direct democracy is probably better, Smokey. All right, Mark MT says, "Omega Corporation free world would be better. What about small startups with growth limits?" I don't know if I ever said anything that could be misconstrued as so a mega corporation. Oh, a world free of mega corporations would be better. Yes, 100%. What about small startups with growth limits? I don't know if we need growth limits. Just think that we need to not have, I think that we need to not have monopolies. Seems like a better system to not have monopolies. Alrighty, LJ says, "I know this has nothing to do with the conversation." LJ, you're gonna make me blush. I am not Irish. Smokey says, "You don't know what you even read or the structure before. No critical thoughts." All right, so you're being a little caustic, Smokey. So maybe take the temperature down. All I'm doing here is answering people's questions about politics. Smokey says, no one can be an American citizen, hence you don't know the basic. It's U.S. citizen. What a weird thing to say. Okay, Kat says, do you think war on Iran was mostly a distraction? Nah, I think that it was mostly Trump getting suckered by Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham. Smokey says, you think it's American citizen? I'm not here. I have zero interest, Smokey, in getting into an argument about whether the semantics of being a citizen of the United States is called a U.S. citizen or an American citizen. So, you know, you don't know politics. I dealt with you before. Don't know 7 and 27 equals grifter. I gotta be honest, Smokey. I don't really think that you're bringing anything to this live stream. So excellent work, Mia. I was right about to do the same thing. Mark says, remove monopolies and keep capitalism and competition for commodities. Yeah, but I mean, we could also do things like use the power of the state to empower employee-owned companies. We could use the power of the state to create state-based healthcare to compete against capitalist healthcare. You know, state housing and state college and shit like that. Esther says, do you think it will ever be equal? If people do the work, then the answer is yes. All right. Platinum Soul says, U.S. United Statistan. Station? I thought it was the United States of America, American citizen. Yeah, this guy, Smokey, is just being caustic. He's trying to get me to fight him so that I'll get like pinged on my channel and then people won't watch me anymore. R. Smith says, thoughts on Costco? They seem to be doing good things. Yeah, I don't really have any hate for Costco. Zane says, do you think the Iran war is only isolated to Trump's administration? Yes, 100%. If we get rid of Trump and we replace him with a Democratic president, we don't have the war in Iran, or we end the war in Iran. CS says, do you agree with countries purchasing land from other countries? No, I'm open to an argument for why it might be a good thing, but I'm confident in saying no, in signing my name to no right now. Terry says, what do you think about trans people? If people want to be trans, they should be able to be trans. Let them trans. EI3 says, what do you think about Rupert Lowe? Don't know who that is. Zane says, you believe in a mixed market? Yes, a little communism, a little capitalism, socialism. It all works together good in the stew of the economy. Mark says, centralized would be hard to keep fair, same as now with government officials giving contracts to friends. I mean, not with oversight, Mark. Like, obviously, it's never going to be perfect, and there will be corruption and grift. But if you have oversight and you have good people doing the oversight, and we empower people doing the oversight, then you have less, you know, and less is better. Sunny says, opinion on immigration. It's good. Zane says, are you taking guest requests? No. What did you say that you said? A mixed. You don't think that a mixed market is good, Zane? Is that what you're saying? Legion says Rupert is the Restore Britain guy. Oh, well then he sucks. Thank you, Mihu. Good to see you again. Jay says, what do you think of Hassan Piker? I think I agree with Hassan on like 99% of shit, but there's like the 1% of shit that we like really, really disagree on hard. I think that anybody who is that popular, who is bringing progressive politics to young people, is a net positive. I think he has said some really batshit bananas things that I do not endorse. But generally speaking, I think that if you are basing your politics based on what Hassan said, you're going to be mostly right about shit. Zane says, you can't mix private ownership over means of production with public ownership. Well, that's your opinion, Zane. I do not believe that is accurate. Miguel Meme says, do you support Black Lives Matter? Yes, I do, because Black lives do matter. Bertram says, Democratic Party needs Mamdani or Sanders. I mean, we have them. The Democratic Party has those people. Bertram? NR says, opinion on Restore UK. Restore UK is bullshit. Restore UK is a political party that is trying to convince you that immigrants are the cause of all your problems when the cause of all your problems are billionaires instead. Thank you for being here, everybody. We're going to start wrapping things up. If you want to support the show financially, you can. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch for free. Costs you $0, helps me out a ton. You can also join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and there's a very fun incentive at $10 a month. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream or something comes up later, do not be shy about reaching out to me. I want to be a resource for you to be more involved and more informed about politics. So if there's any way that I can do that for you, fucking hit me up, use me and abuse me, use me until you use me up. My DMs are open. You can also email me through my website. Link is in the bio. You could also hit me up on my Discord channel. Link is also in the bio. And the Discord channel is great because there's a great community of people there who are down with discussing politics in a way that is very much not shitty. And there's recommendations there for books and podcasts and also civic actions. It is very important that we do those civic actions. Zane, you need to ask a question or I'm going to boot you. It is very important that we do those civic actions because it is only through us doing the work that we're going to be able to get out of this shit. Like, the rich and the powerful are still out there trying to ruin our fucking lives. Like, they have all the money and they still want more. They want your fucking blood and your bones and your tears and your sweat, and they will not stop. So we have to do the work. We got to organize and protest and strike and use political pressure and recruit and convince and talk to people in real life. That is the way that we get out of this shit. And voting, of course, might be maybe the most important thing is voting. Find me some non-voters and I'll convince them to vote. You know, let's do the work here, guys. Let's do the work. Michaela Beam says, do you support White Lives Matter, though? Do they matter? So Black Lives Matter isn't an organization that says only Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter says that our culture, our systems, our Department of Justice is behaving as though Black lives do not matter. And so, ergo, we have decided to create an organization called Black Lives Matter, or chanting Black Lives Matter. But yeah, it is accurate to say that all lives matter. But if I started a cancer research, charity, would you then go like, all diseases matter? Why don't you? What you're only gonna give money to cancer? What about AIDS? What about fucking heart disease? Do you not give a shit about those diseases? You see how that's like a false dichotomy there? All right, Mark says ultra billionaires go a bit too hard, but what about millionaires, people that got rich fairly? So I think an argument could be made that no human being gets rich fairly, Mark, but that's a little bit more drastic than I might advocate for. I would instead just say, let's see what happens when we get rid of the billionaires. Let's see what happens when we tax billionaires to the point where their net worth is only $900 million. And then we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I am open to an argument of making it so that no human being has more than $500 million. And then we'll see how that goes, But the system as it stands is untenable and unsustainable. And so let's change that before we start getting into which level of rich is unacceptable. How about we start with the trillionaire, and then we'll get to the billionaires, and then we can see how things are going. All right, 095 Salmon says, you seem like a bit of a liberal that envy people that make it. No, that is inaccurate. Somebody once said, when I was poor and I complained about the rich, they said I was jealous. And now that I'm rich and I complain about the rich, they say I'm a hypocrite. Seems like they just don't like it when I complain about the rich. Okay. Mark says, wouldn't a lot of jobs go under since very expensive commodities can't be bought anymore? No, I disagree with that entirely. When you accumulate wealth into the hands of a small group of people, you are taking those resources away from everybody else. At the same time, you are saying that goods can cost anything because we have this group of people over here that can pay anything. So opposite is what's happening right now. Because of monopolization and because of a accumulation of wealth in the hands of the very few, that is why we are seeing the world becoming less livable. That is why we are living in a cost of living crisis in America. All right, Gabriel says, why do MAGA bros only think that anyone who opposes them is a liberal? There's probably some propaganda that is telling them that, Okay, Ace says, are you a civic nationalist? I don't know what that means. Mark says, what about the shipbuilding industry? Immense tankers and carriers. Well, humans pay taxes. Those taxes can be collected, and then we can use those taxes to pay for things that are really expensive, like tankers and carriers. Alrighty, everybody. Nicholas says, why do you use the passive B word, billionaire, to refrain from using accurate B word, bourgeoisie? I guess because more people understand what a billionaire is, as opposed to who the bourgeoisie is or who oligarchs are. Nicholas, I am, if nothing, I am a man of the people, and so I speak the language of the people. All right, everybody, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your support and your questions and your engagements and your likes and your shares. If you think what I'm doing is a good job, then tell everybody what a good job I am doing and tell them to watch the show and tell them to subscribe and do all that good shit. So do the work. Be good to each other. You don't have to be a dick to do the work. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bet time, same bet channel. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye. Goodbye.